Hello, Internet. Well, it's that time again. We have a new presenter. Now, normally when we have a new presenter, we just take him through the strides. And this is a SAAF man as well as a Navy man. Therefore, I got our other presenter, Fossie Foster, here also in the background. And I want to say to all of you, welcome here, gents. We're really grateful for you. And because of a man's age and the rank as a New Zealand Navy captain, I will not do the normal things I do to the new presenters. Poor old Fossie, he was suffering blood that day. We were recording SWFRE, my Special Forces Sergeant Major, who wrote the book. And I was apparently pulling faces or something, Fossie. I'm not sure exactly what I was doing. I was waving like this and doing all sorts of things.
Do you really want to know what you were doing? Well, this is what you were doing to me.
Yeah, I was actually doing that to Fossie, and yeah, well, it's all in good fun and games. Yes, I was, but we'll not do this with Captain du Plooy. Now, this brings me to the man himself, Oom At du Plooy, Captain du Plooy. So you're welcome here. Thank you. When you said to me that you want to speak to people and you're a little bit bored, I would say to you, well, welcome here. So may I ask you if you can just tell us here, where do you come from? You had an episode on Legacy, two of them. I believe by 1962 you were already a fellow flight engineer. But you tell the story. If you can tell us just very shortly where you come from, sir.
Okay, Koos. And good evening to you and Fossie. Now, it's evening here in New Zealand. In fact, it's 7:30 in the evening. I was born in Harrismith in the Orange Free State. Note, I say the Orange Free State. But I grew up in Durban and went to school in Durban. And from there, I joined the Air Force in 1958. And I was sworn in on the 3rd of May 1958. And my first base was obviously 68 Air School. I joined in as an apprentice fitter aircraft. And at 68 Air School, I went through the normal basics like any soldier and started our training. After basics, theory and a lot of practical, a whole lot of workshops we went through. And from there, I was transferred to Central Flying School at Donata, and we started working on aircraft, flying aircraft, the old Harvards. And I spent 9 months at Central Flying School, and then I was transferred to SWAT Corps, and there I was posted to the Dakota hangar, and we were trained on Dakotas, all the ins and outs of Dakotas. And also I was very fortunate. I was one of the last bunch of apprentices who actually did a major service on an old, what, another name slipped my mind, Ventura, the old Ventura, the PVs, Venturas. And after we completed the test flight with Porky Rich, very famous Porky Rich. And then they were inhibited and took down to 15 Air Depot. I don't know if it's still 15 Air Depot now or whatever its name is, but it also shared the runway and the airfield of SWAT Corps. It's right next to where the Air Force, that monument of the Air Force monument is in the beginning of Snake Valley. I spent 6 months at SWAT Corps, and from there we went to one air depot, and the rest of my apprenticeship we spent at one air depot working through all the different workshops, and until we were ready to do what was then called conversion, which was a 3-month theory course back at 68 Air School. And we went through our whole trade, make sure that we know everything we ought to know, and we wrote weekly exams. And once you pass all that and you've done your your years as an apprentice, and then you can qualify as an artisan. And I qualified in the June of 1962. Yes, June 1962. I qualified as a fitter aircraft, and 9 of us were chosen to do the helicopter course, which was very new then for the SAAF. A year or two before that time, they started buying Alouettes from France, the Alouette 2s, which is the training aircraft, and then after that, the Alouette 3s. During that time, I was very fortunate, and there are not many guys who can brag about this one. We were sent to France to Sud Aviation, where they make the Alouettes, and there I was shown, and I actually sat in one as well, a DJIN, DJIN, which is also a helicopter, but it doesn't have a tail rotor because the engine didn't work into a gearbox. The engine drove a compressor, and it was compressed air that was fed up the shaft and to the rotors at the top. The rotors were freewheeling rotors. They were not attached to anything other than the bearings. And along the rotors inside, there was a pipe which exited at a jet. It's an air outlet at the tip of those rotors. And when you run the main engine, it pumped air along the length of the rotor, and it caused the jet stream. It's just air. It's nothing, no flames or anything like that. That happened in the main engine. And those air jets drove the rotors. So it didn't require an anti-torque rotor because that whole mechanism did not generate any torque. That was the DJIN. Very interesting little air, tiny little thing. Also a 2-seater, but nevertheless, we did the helicopter course. I'm not quite sure. I think that was also about 3 months. And then we were posted down to Easterplaat, to 17th Squadron in Easterplaat, where we commenced our actual training as flight engineers, flying a lot. We had to do 200 hours flying and a whole series of other courses. We did extensive navigation, all sorts of stuff that we would be required to know and have the skills to act as a flight engineer. And in 1963, I qualified as a flight engineer. Quite a number of interesting things happened. I won't go into any of those details. It's all on Legacy already. You can just Google it, and you can listen to all the interesting things that happened to me. And then I flew with 17 Squadron, and I did a stint as a policeman. We were transferred to the South African Police during that time, and I did a stint up on the border as a police sergeant, of all things. Our pilots were also police captains. We flew SAAF helicopters, but the emblems were taken off, and the police emblem was stuck in there, and we were even issued with a certificate of appointment as a policeman. And we operated on the border as policemen because we couldn't go as soldiers. Otherwise, the world would have exploded around us, where the South Africa sends soldiers to fight the plan guys, the People's Liberation Army of Namibia. Excuse me. Some serious things happened to me there, but nevertheless, I came back to Easterplaat. And I had to do camps. I left the Air Force. I resigned from the Air Force because I wanted to study further. And the Air Force, because they've already spent quite a lot of money on us, they didn't feel like sending me to university. So I managed to get a bursary from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. And I spent 4 years at university. 1 year I spent at Wits, because the SABC had an agreement with Wits to qualify electronic engineers specifically for service in the South African Broadcasting Corporation. From there, I got a posting, or was appointed at the old Cape Technikon as a lecturer. I did quite a bit of work with the SABC, 5 years in their service, mostly installing electronics, the older transmitters and the receivers and antennas at the FM stations, until I left them. Then I went and worked I started lecturing radio engineering at the Cape Technikon. That later changed to the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. Excuse me. And I retired there in 1993 as the Deputy Registrar Academic. I was very happy. I had a nice job when I retired, but I retired due to the fact that my medical condition deteriorated, and the doctors thought it's best that I stop working. But I never stopped working. After I retired from the university, I started my own company, 2 companies, in fact. And I held on to one of them until I emigrated in 2001. I didn't feel very much at home anymore in South Africa. And I decided, for the better of South Africa and the better of myself, I better move. So I came to New Zealand. And I was appointed in the Royal New Zealand Navy. And I worked for them for 6 years. And then I retired in 2006. And since in 2006, I've been lazing around here, enjoying my hobbies. Now, guys, I said to me, I spent 6 years in Australia as well. So they said to me, you've done a lot of things in your life now. What are you doing now to pass the time? And I said, well, at school, I had chemistry as a subject. So whenever I'm really bored, I'll sit under the tree here and I'll do some chemical experiments. I said, well, what can you do? What chemical experiments can you do under a tree? I said, well, I convert good whiskey into urine. So it takes quite a bit of effort, but I enjoy it. I enjoy that job. It's a nice job. And I've been living here. I toured the whole of New Zealand as well as Australia. In fact, I always wanted to be a pilot since I was a kid. So I could fix airplanes. I could fly a helicopter because we were taught how to fly them to a certain extent. Sometimes I think we outdid some of the young pilots. And but I always wanted to fly a fixed wing airplane. So when was it? In 2000 but I was 70 years old when I got my Australian pilot license, which is known as the private pilot in South Africa. Yeah, it's just called a pilot license. I've still got it. And you know what? I'm just getting better from a spell of COVID, yeah. And I still got a bit of it on my chest, so please excuse me. I turned 70 in a place called Alice Springs, which is the center of Australia. And we were there because my daughter fell very ill, and we went to help her. And when she was better, we started touring. I built myself a big motorhome out of an old school bus, and we toured the whole of Australia. If I add up all the miles that I did on touring, Australia was about 45,000 miles, but Australia is so big. Nevertheless, my daughter passed away in 2014, and we decided to come home. So we came back to New Zealand, and I've been traveling quite a bit. And then my wife got sick, and she passed away in 2019. And since then, I've been living here in a place called Nelson, which is the northernmost town on the South Island. Nelson, after old Horatio Nelson, who fought at Waterloo. And I've been here living very happily. Apart from a spell of COVID, I'm quite healthy, and I still get around. My main form of transport is an electric scooter. So I ride around town with my electric scooter, and I even go and visit all my friends with my scooter. People say in New Zealand weather is atrocious. It's not. Depends where you are. And yeah, where I live, the weather is quite good. It's the town with the most sun per year in the whole of New Zealand. So I'm quite happy, except now and again I get bored. And then I come and I see who's all sitting on Zoom telling their war stories, and I enjoyed them. And eventually I was hoping that Koos would throw me a hint and say, why didn't you come and work for us? Eventually he did. And here I am, and I'm quite happy to do this. It will be a pleasure for me to talk to the people about their lives and listen to their stories. And there we are. So I've got something to do, and that makes me very happy. So there's my life. If you want to know more, you can just Google Legacy Conversations and my name, At du Plooy, and you'll get to the 2 videos that Koos, with a lot of patience, he made of me. And you can hear my life story in much more detail. There's a couple of interesting things you may find interesting that happened there. And hopefully next time you see me on your screen, I will not be as horsey as I am now. But this is the aftermath of COVID. Everybody suffers and has it in his own way. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned that. But Uh, but mine is a very horsey throat. So the doctor gave me some antibiotics today, and I'll get rid of all this. And you'll hear my nice Pavarotti voice. And okay,
No, that's fine.
Koos,
That's
that
fine.
is
All right.
about it.
Yeah, that's it. I have a few questions, but then I want to ask Fossey something. He's very patient there in the background since he
Yes.
pulled the faces at me. He doesn't work with me, by the way. That Ventura you were working on, I remind myself that in 1941, if I'm right, I might be wrong, a Ventura bomber, light bomber, tried to rescue some people in the Namib Desert, in the Skeleton Desert. There was a ship which ran ashore. This was wartime, of course. And the Ventura flew in. It actually landed, but it couldn't take off. So it is still there. I remember standing as a child on one of its engines. Am I right when I say that, or do I have a history wrong here?
Are you, now, is it for Fozzie or for me?
No, both
For
of
me.
you. You are Air Force
Oh,
people. Now tell me the history.
yeah. I know of the story. I've been to that area a lot because there was a time when I lived at Oranje Munt, and we used to the angling club at Oranje Munt. We used to hire a Dakota from Southwest Africa Airways, and we used to fly up to a place called Neop Bay and land with a Dakota and 25 guys on board on a salt pan. Now, I also know that the story goes that the Ventura should never have been flown. It's not really an if it wasn't for those massive engines to pull it up, it would not have taken off. Now, that's why it won't surprise me to hear that a Ventura landed perhaps on a salt pan and couldn't get off. That wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know that as a fact.
Bossy, do you know anything about that?
No, Koos, pass on this one. I've never, in fact, I don't think I've ever been anywhere apart from landing one night at Rooikop for a night stop, ever been on the coast of Namibia. So, in all my visits to that beautiful country.
I saw something strange the other day. I saw an old Afrikaans movie called Ses Soldate. And if you've ever wanted to see a propaganda movie in South Africa, it was now this week. And of course, it had a huge influence on me because this was the early 70s. I was just about 6, 7 years old. And I remember the movie. But when you look at something many years later, you know how it is. It's either smaller or bigger. It does not have the same effect. And the alouettes we were using in that movie was not painted the same colors which I got used to them. I think Fossey in your time, they were green.
Yeah,
Or,
yeah.
is that true, Oom? Were these alouettes at first
Yes,
green?
yes. They were like an olive green. Yeah, they were olive green. Yes, in my time, the Alouette twos were, of course, the canopy was day glow and plexiglass, and the tail was looked like a draad car, you know. But the Mox, the Alouette threes, they were green. Yeah.
Now I want to ask Fossey something. Fossey, when you heard Oom At talking about his career, does that sound familiar to you?
Okay, I'm going to say a few things here. When I joined the SAAF, we went to what Oom At refers to as 68 Air School. That name was still floating about. The Omana was still calling it 68, but it was by that stage no longer called that officially. It was STT, School for Technical Training. STO, School for Technische Opleiding. Or as RSM Oberholster used to call it, School vir Ongehuide Moeders. RSM Oberholster was a big man with a very, very big voice. He was a terrific RSM, if ever you've met an RSM in your life. Anyway, so we didn't refer to it as that, as 68 Air School. It was at that stage of the game already changed its role as a proper, well, it was still an air school, but it was more apprentice training. So if that's one thing, the other thing I'd like to mention, yes, my apprentice training went much along those lines, where you went to a squadron and then you learned things at the squadron, and then you went back to school blocks and you did. I was fortunate. I came to the Air Force, but that's for a story for another day, out of an academic school with a university exemption. So the Air Force were looking for lighties like us. If we pulled weight, they would send us to college or university. But what I want to mention specifically around, I did follow that path, and somewhere along the line in about 1980, things went slightly awry, and I decided I was going to leave the Air Force at the end of 1980. But then they came back to me and they said to me, "You owe us a year, blah, blah, blah." So I decided, okay, at this stage I was at 6th Squadron, 6th Squadron Impalas in Port Elizabeth, as a ground crew, ground engineer. But of course there was 16th Squadron up, but I had decided not to become a flight engineer. I was asked, even when I qualified as an apprentice, to become a journeyman, a tradesman. I was asked then already, but that's, as I say, a story. It's not about me yet. But what I want to say then, after a lot of persuasion by flight engineers in the operational area, I did a lot of ground crew tours, and names I'm going to name here that Oom At will probably remember. Oom Piet O'Neill.
Yes.
Johnny O'Neill. They were not related, but those two had Johnny at that stage was the permanent flight engineer at Mapacha. They had a massive influence. Norman Esquihole in Durban. There were a few others. Russell Dupree. The Durban guys used to do the tours there, and that's where I met them. And they kept at me, go do flight engineers course. So I did my flight engineers course and qualified a full 20 years after Oom At qualified as a flight engineer. 40 years ago this year, I qualified on the 8th of December. So Oom At, you are 20 years ahead of me as it comes to qualifying as a flight engineer. We never went to France to go and learn. I would have loved to go to France. I might never have gone home, because in that area there, Marseille, that's a terrific area of France. I probably would never have gone back to South Africa. So, long story short, Oom At, I am your apprentice by 20 years.
Yes, Fossey. Piet O'Neill, I remember him very well. There were other interesting characters which possibly you would have heard of if you never knew them. The one was Rassie Erasmus. He was in the Air Force at the same time. He wasn't a flight engineer, but he was in charge of boxing in the Air Force. So he arranged all these boxing tournaments. And then there was another one. He was a flight engineer, Stacy. Now, I can't remember. I think that was his surname as well, Stacy. Now, it's one of the camps that I had to do. And we were at Mapacha, and one of the choppers had to get an engine change. So, having no ground crew there, we all the flight engineers, we were all ground crew as well, trained. So we got stuck in, and we took this engine out. Excuse me. And we stuck a new engine in the Alouette, Artus 3B, if you remember. And then we did a couple of run-ups on it, and Stacy was sitting in the right-hand seat in front. We all piled in because he wanted to check the collective And for that, you have a little bit of weight in the aircraft because you want to, don't want to lift off, but you want to pull some collective, put some power on this engine. So we all piled into this Alouette, and old Stacey is running the engine. And you can feel it when he pulls the collective. You know, you get a little bit of what do they call it? Ground resonance. Yeah, it sort of starts bumping a little bit. And we were on the verge of lifting off. Now, there's no pilot. There's just Stacey sitting on the behind the with the controls. And suddenly we're about 10 feet off the ground. And it's dead quiet. Nobody said a word. And yeah, Stacey is hovering this thing. And one of the guys said to him, Stacey, let's go for it. Let's go and fly this bloody thing, man. So Stacey really took off. And we did a whole circuit over Mapacha. But there was a couple of pilots, and one of them was old Major Tom. I don't know if the name rings a bell. He was also in 17th Squadron. He was a major then, but not a very pleasant character. And they were sitting having beers, and suddenly a helicopter flew over them, and he looked around, and he saw that all the pilots are here. So who the heck's flying that chopper? And by the time we landed again, our Major Tom was there in his Jeep. And now he wanted to know who flew the helicopter. So we all said we flew it. Everybody, I think there was 6 or 7 of us. We all put up our hands. We flew it. And he wanted to kill us, you know, because we're standing together here now. But in the end, old Stacey owned up. And I don't know what happened. Not much. Because I'll tell you, we were trained to fly those things as flight engineers. The pilots didn't have much of a choice, you know. If something happens to the pilot, there's nobody to help him. So we were trained, and not formally. We couldn't put it in our logbooks that we underwent, you know, all the different maneuvers. But we did square bashing. We took off. We landed. We did low flying. I did a low flying stint from Langebaan by the sea down to Eysterplaat, a couple of meters off the deck all along the beach. So we were quite competent in flying that. Another mate of mine, he's still alive. He lives in Cape Town, or Justin Benger. He could fly very well, very well. Nevertheless, so those were the old names. And then some of the RSMs, old Specky de Villiers, he was our RSM at 68 Air School. Charlie Knudsen was our RSM at 1 Air Depot. You know, there was a pilot, I think Dave Knudsen. I can't remember what he flew, but he was a pilot. That is Charlie Knudsen's son. I knew Dave. I saw him the first time when he was a little boy, because we tried to date his sister, beautiful girl. But Charlie quickly put an end to that. Interesting guys you may have heard of, Colonel, what the heck, my memory, Dennis Earp. He was a general. He was chief of the Air Force. I met him when he was a young captain at Denota. Dennis Earp. Who else was there? And there was another one, a very nice little old man. He was also chief of the Air Force at some stage. It'll come back. Oh yes, the Air Force gym. We had a excuse me, man. At 68, we had our drill sergeant. when I joined was a guy by the name of Joe van der Merwe, Sergeant Joe van der Merwe. He was one of the instructors there. And later on, I believe he became the OC of the gym, the Air Force gym at Swartkoop. Those were the names. Nevertheless, when I go to bed tonight and I lie and think, then I remember a lot of names. So I'm going to phone you then and tell you.
Well, we learned a very good lesson here, actually. You people wouldn't know. But we sometimes forget to press actually record and things here because we're listening to people and then you get carried away and you listen to the story and so. But I think we can all agree here that Oom At will be a very valuable presenter for us here. That is once he survived COVID. I remember when I had this horrible illness, I was coughing for 6 weeks straight, and the poor guys on the other side, they would stop talking so that I could stop coughing and carry on. So thank you for coming, Oom At. Thank you for taking the time, even though you're still coughing a bit. I want to say to you, sir, very welcome here. Thank you for coming. You're the first officer we have on Legacy. We're breaking the mold here. Up to now, we have the most senior of all of us was Fossey himself. I think he was a flight sergeant. Of course, a police sergeant doesn't really count. And I believe our auditor, Andrew, he stayed a troop. I know how he stayed a troop being an auditor, but that happened. And Nikki, of course, doesn't count. So we're really glad you're here, Oom At. And I want to say to all of you people here, guys, if you think you are bored or you feel you can contribute here and you want to come and join us and speak to the men and bring their stories out, it's a fantastic life. It is really nice. Fossey, will you agree? It changed your life sort of, I would say, in a better way.
Sorry, yes. I was in myself crying out for contact with veterans because living in Ireland, it was very, very difficult. And WhatsApp, something that I detest mobile phones, but WhatsApp made it possible. And then Steve Kutsia, flight engineer, who has been on Legacy Conversations a number of times, he actually sent me the link for Legacy Conversations, and I mailed Koos and said, I have time. I don't have blah, blah. And Koos ignored me for about 6 weeks, 7 weeks. And then he sent me an edit to do. And this is Koos's way. I've got to come clean here. And I had to learn editing because I thought this would be easy because I've got my own little YouTube channel. So I thought, okay, this is going to be short, half an hour. I think he sent me the most difficult edit that he had on his books to see because he was quite blunt and honest with it. If you cock up, it's the last time. You're not going to get another opportunity. And I found it extremely therapeutic doing the edit and learning at the same time. I learned a brand new software while editing that, and that's the only way to do it. And I think I'm right in saying, Koos, that I have edited dozens of videos that are on the channel. I love doing it. It gets a little bit frustrating occasionally when you don't get something 100% the way you want it. And that also, remember, guys, we are not professionals. Nobody sent me to film editing school. So yes, this is part and parcel of Legacy Conversations, is offering guys like Oom At, like myself, the opportunity to use some of our brain capacity still at our age. I'm much younger than Oom At, obviously, about 15 years, I'd say. But still, the point of the matter is we are making a difference to our own lives. And as Kevin Johnson will say, it's a mindset shift So in my case, it's helping me tremendously to focus on something which I really enjoy. So yes, it is well worth it.
Yeah, we're grateful for you, Kosi. I must tell you, we did fantastic work when this new episodes comes out of Ops Amazon. Now, let me tell you, when I say Ops Amazon these days, I want to throw up. But you people will not be like that. Kosi is laughing there in the background because, guys, we spend hundreds of hours with this. When you work with the Special Forces people, they near it. They worse than flight engineers, I would say, actually. They want things absolutely the same way. And we found out from the Navy as well, but if an admiral makes a suggestion, it's not actually a suggestion. It is like come by something like that. So we were making hundreds of hours of edits, but it's worth it because we're having fun doing this. I can tell you, when you walk down the street like Andrew did the other day, and somebody stops him, and I'm still wondering why they were so polite. They said something like, "Are you Mr. Andrew Whittaker from Legacy Conversations?" And he said yes, and then they surrounded him there, and now he's like the guest of honor speaking at some dinner date, which you people would have seen a video about. I think it's on the 30th of September at the Cambridge Bowling Club. That's in East London, by the way. I know it very well. I tried to steal a tree there once, a tree trunk. It's a long story. I'm not admitting guilt. And yeah, also, if you're wondering why Creative Language Center is standing here below my name instead of formal Samil or Koos or whatever, simply I had to use Rebecca School's Zoom. That's why it's there. I hope you will just ignore it. If you want to learn to speak Spanish or French, then that's where you go to, as well as English. But anyway, no, that was just a mistake. Oom At, last words that I say to him is very welcome. Thank you for joining us. I hope Oom will have lots and lots of people to meet. I think Oom will see it's a lot of fun. And the rest of you, well, we call him Oom, you call him Captain or Sir. No, he's showing there, no, not. Oom At, you don't want to be called that.
If I was in the Navy now and you were a rating, yes. I'm not in the Navy. I'm not in the Air Force. I was. I was a has-been. Now I am Oom At. Oom At is a bigger rank, the best rank I've ever had. Nobody had so much respect for me when I was a captain. I'll tell you what, just as a last thing, what happened where I was present. I used to train navigators in South Africa as well. After I left the university, ship's navigators. And I had to get my charts because in the Navy, you don't use maps. You use a chart. And incidentally, the difference between a map and a chart, a map is drawn from a vertical perspective. And a chart is drawn from a horizontal perspective. So if you look at a chart, yes, a map, you see from the top. That's what we use in the Air Force and in road maps and so on. But you don't use a map at sea because you can only see what you can see while you're on the ocean. So if there's a mountain, it's no good spending time and money to draw on a piece of paper what is behind that mountain. You will never see it from the sea. So you only draw what is seen from the sea. That is a chart. The depth of the ocean, yes, and what you see, the topography, the land, the shape of the land, and important things like lighthouses, and cities, and whatever. But I used to get my charts from Silvermine, the Navy unit there above Simonstown. And the chief the hydrographer of the South African Navy, he was also a captain. And once in every 2-3 months, I used to drive up to Silver Mine to go and get some charts. And he walked me out. We always had tea together and a little bit of a chat. He walked me out to my car. And as we crossed the parking area, there was a paper bag blowing around. And there was a writing. Now, I won't mention race or anything like that, but there was this writing. And this captain said to him, he said, young man, just grab that paper for us, please. And the guy looked at him and he said, you saw it first, you pick it up. Can you believe it? So, I don't belong in the Navy anymore because I would have been murdered. I would have been a murderer. So, in any case, nou, my naam is Oom At.
Wel, laat julle ouens gehoor, Oom At dit is en Oom At gaan dit bly. En ek kan nie self te sê in Afrikaans, Oom At, ons is bly oom is hier. Fossie, het jy iets te sê voor ons ophou praat hier en die oom 'n kans gee om oor die vreeslike siekte te kom?
Up the Air Force.
Ek is nie seker of ek dit reg verstaan het nie. Is dit up the Air Force of is dit up the Air Force? Fossie, wat is dit? Hulle blue jobs is bietjie weird.
Koos, op 'n dag gaan ek jou in 'n allow se strop sit en ongelukkig gaan daai strop grond toe gaan en jy gaan ja, nee, ek sê niks verder nie, want jy koggel te erg die lugmag. Jy moet pas op. Pas op.
Ek wil daarom
Ons
net
sal hom
sê,
'n strop laat vang wat nog nie die grond geraak het nie.
ja, wel, ek is nou gewaarsku, julle sal sukkel om my in te kry, maar ek sal dit vir julle sê, ek onthou my oorlede vrou. En natuurlik is altyd gesê die lugmag is iets wat nie kan navigate nie, want hulle verdwaal altyd. En sy wat 'n naval aviator is, verdwaal nooit, want sy moet haar carrier vind. Maar sy het 'n onchristellike grynslag in haar oë begin kry as sy begin praat het van vlieg. En dis waar ek myself beloof het, ek klim nie in 'n vliegtuig in waar sy is nie, want ek is doodseker sy gaan iets aan my doen. Maar nie as reg Fossie, ek het julle miskien net verkeerd verstaan. Ons hou van die lugmag ook. Die lugmag se uniform, veral vir die aircrew, is werklik waar iets besonders. Baie, baie mooi. Maar mense, ons praat nou lekker Afrikaans, ons moet nou klaarmaak hier. Oom At moet gaan sy pille en goed drink. Ek het ander goed om te doen en Fossie se dag begin nou in Ierland. Baie dankie dat julle hier geluister het. As julle 'n storie het, mense kom praat met ons, dus stuur ons net gou 'n e-mail. As jy in Australië, Nieu-Seeland, daai kant van die wêreld is, word gewoond aan Oom At, want die tyd is vir ons baie makliker as wat, jy weet, ek sit in Thailand, Andrew is in Suid-Afrika, Fossie is in Ierland. So maak kontak met ons en tot ons mekaar weer eendag sien. Laat die Here julle seën.